when the other side attacks you, they are not attacking you because you're a Kannadiga. They're not attacking you because you're a Maharashtrian. They're not attacking you because you're a Kashmiri or Konkani or Tamil or Telugu or whoever. They're attacking you because you're Hindu.
Yes.
They're not attacking you because you're a Brahmin or a Thakur or a Nishad or a Dalit or a tribal or whatever. They're attacking you because you're a Hindu. They're not attacking you because you're a doctor, you're a vegetable seller, or you're a teacher, or you're a dancer, or whatever. They are attacking you because you're a Hindu. So your response also should be as a Hindu. So your first identity, it should be Indian, and your second identity, your equally important identity, should be that of a Hindu. Everything else comes later. No? They burned down police station, they burned down public property, they made the administration impose section 144, and then they did this fake human chain around a temple, and then everything was forgiven, right? NDTV,
Yes.
which did not even mention the main news, which did not even mention that it was Muslims who attacked the police station, but they very quickly did a whole story on how Muslims protected a mandir from burning by forming a human chain. But they never asked who were they protecting the temple from?
Yeah.
Who was going to burn down the temple?
Right.
Was it Hindus? Was it Jains? Was it Buddhists? Was it Sikh? Kaun tha, right? Or I'm going to a liquor store and I'm buying beer openly and I'm putting pictures on social media. Don't judge me for it. Or I'm smoking a cigarette and that is how I'm equal to men. I think that is, you're trivializing the very issues that you're talking about. The issues of women's rights. Feminism is not about your right to smoke like a man. You may want to, you may not want to, that's your problem. If you want to really screw up your lungs, that's your problem. But that is not feminism.
Right.
Feminism is ensuring that every girl child in this country gets an opportunity to study. That she has the same opportunities as her brothers. That if a family has only enough money to educate one child, then the family doesn't choose the boy over the girl. That is the fight that you should be fighting for. That is my only thing. So not only am I a writer, I am a writer contracted with Bloomsbury India. I had a contract with them. My book with Bloomsbury India was supposed to be out end of this year. But I'm so shocked at Bloomsbury India's treatment of a fellow writer, Monica Arora, and her co-writers Prerna Malhotra and Sonali Chitalkar, that I have decided to withdraw from that contract. I do not want to publish with a publisher who basically decides at the last moment, under pressure from somebody, and says without giving a valid reason that we are not going to publish your book. If they can do that to Monica Arora, they can do it to anybody.
Namaste viewers. Welcome to the Indus Lens Show. Today we have a very special guest. She's a well-known author and a social activist, and she single-handedly took down and exposed several organizations and hypocrites in Bharat. So, Shefali Vaidyaji, welcome to the Indus Lens Show.
Namaste. Thank you so much for giving me this chance to talk to your viewers today.
It's our pleasure. Shefali ji, first and foremost, I would like to start with the very hot current topic ongoing at this point of time. Since you are an author, I would like to know your point of view on the current Bloomsbury situation. What had happened? Had you faced certain situations, similar situation in your career, or what do you think on this entire issue?
See, to give you a little background, I don't know if your viewers already know about what happened really. So Bloomsbury India is a publishing arm of Bloomsbury, and Bloomsbury, as you know, is a large publishing house which has operations in Australia, in UK, in several other countries. They have a publishing arm in India as well. And they have published several books. They have published books of different points of view, including the Hindu point of view as well as the left point of view, whatever. And even on what happened in Delhi in February following the CAA and NRC agitation that was going on at Shaheen Bagh, Bloomsbury actually signed 2 book contracts with 2 writers of 2 differing viewpoints. One was somebody who said, this is the story of the Shaheen Bagh activism, that is anti-CAA NRC protesters. And the second one was, it was a book by Monica Arora, Prerna Malhotra, and Sonali Chitalkar on the Delhi riots based on their fact-finding report, which they had already published before. So here, Bloomsbury India had given both these authors from differing viewpoints contracts. They had followed their due diligence. They had vetted the manuscript. They had invited manuscripts, especially Monica Arora's book. So they had accepted manuscripts, they had signed a contract with her, they went through the changes, they went through the legal vetting of the manuscript, and they agreed to publish the manuscript. They even published 100 print copies, which Monica Arora had in her hand. And Monica Arora and the other authors, they decided to go ahead with a private launch of the book, for which they invited BJP politician Kapil Mishra as the
Mhm.
chief guest. And
Mhm.
this was in Delhi. Now, this function was not held in secret, okay? It was announced well before 21st, well before 24th, I think they held a launch. But from 21st, the invites had gone out, the social media flyers had gone out, and Bloomsbury India did not react.
Mhm.
But when there was a lot of outrage from the predictable left liberal circles, ironically, these are the same people who keep talking about freedom of expression. They keep saying that this government is intolerant, fascist, they muzzle everybody's freedom of speech. These are
Mhm.
the same people. So
Right.
these are the same people who suddenly woke up and they said, "How dare Bloomsbury publish this book, and how dare the book authors invite Kapil Mishra for the publications?"
Mhm. Mhm.
And somewhere in this, I think William Dalrymple also got involved, though I don't have the proof for it. But there
Mhm.
is proof of him saying that I am working on it. So are other Bloomsbury India authors, and I'm going to talk to Bloomsbury UK about it. This is in public domain, okay? But whatever happened, literally half an hour before the launch, when all these people, Kapil Mishra ji, Nupur Sharma, Monica Arora, were just going out to for this function and getting ready to launch this book, literally half an hour before that, the Bloomsbury India person called and told them that we are under a lot of pressure from Bloomsbury UK. And this Monica Arora told me in an interview that I did with her a couple of days ago. So this is
Okay.
authentic information. So she said that literally at 3:30, and the function was at 4 o'clock. At 3:30, she got a call from Bloomsbury India saying that even we are amazed and even we are aghast at what is going on. But Bloomsbury UK is putting a lot of pressure on us, and we have decided to withdraw from publishing your book.
Mhm.
Now, the reason Bloomsbury gave, and when they make the public statement, was that we don't approve the person Monica Arora ji called for the launch of the book. We don't approve of Kapil Mishra, and they have used our logo in an unauthorized manner. I can understand Bloomsbury India as a publisher saying that this is not our function. I can understand them saying that we disassociate ourselves from this function because we have not organized it and our official launch will happen 1 month later. But to say that because of this, when you've already vetted the manuscript, when you've already
Mhm.
done all the due diligence, when you've
Right. Right.
already gone through multiple editions and iterations, and you've published the book is ready, you started accepting pre orders of the book, to say that we are withdrawing from the publication, it's an assault on the freedom of expression of not just the writers, but
Right.
also it's an assault on the freedom of expression of the readers. You are denying the readers their right to know the truth. You
Mhm.
are saying that we'll publish only one point of view, which is the Shaheen Bagh CA and NRC activist point of view, again, who are against these bills. But we will not publish this fact finding report about the Delhi riots and what really happened to them, because we don't want you to know the truth. That is the
Mhm.
standard Bloomsbury India has taken for whatever
Mhm.
reason. Because of pressure from Bloomsbury UK, I don't know what really happened there. But to me, it's shocking that a publishing house, which actually went on to sign a contract, went through all the processes that they're supposed to do before publication. See,
Mhm.
the decision whether to publish a book or not is a decision that you take before the publication, not when you started taking pre-orders, not when you are 1 week away from the launch, not when you already published 100 print copies and given it to the writer. This is not done. This is not moral, this is not ethical, and this is definitely not legal, because this is a breach of contract.
Right.
Now you're
Right.
asking me my point of view as a writer. So not only am I a writer, I am a writer contracted with Bloomsbury India. I had a contract with them. My book with Bloomsbury India was supposed to be out end of this year. But I'm so shocked at Bloomsbury India's treatment of a fellow writer, Monica Arora, and her co-writers, Prerna Malhotra and Sonali Chitalkar, that I have decided to withdraw from that contract. I do not want to publish with a publisher who basically decides at the last moment, under pressure from somebody, and says without giving a valid reason that we are not going to publish your book. If they can do that to Monica Arora, they can do it to anybody. And the
Right.
point is, all the people who were all these days saying we are the champions of freedom of speech, everybody should have a right to publish a book. If you don't like a book, don't read it, write a better book. Why don't they apply the same logic to their own selves? If they don't like Monica Arora's book, don't read it, don't buy
Mm-hmm.
it, or
Mm-hmm.
write a better book. That's what we
Mm-hmm.
keep telling people on the Hindu side, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every time you talk about a book that insults our way of life or our religion or our icons, this is
Mm-hmm.
a logic that the left side always gives us. If you don't like this book, write a better book. If you don't like this book, don't read it. This is my advice to them. If you don't like this book, don't read it. If you
Mm.
don't like this book, write a better book. And the
Right.
point is actually, Bloomsbury India did a huge favor to Monica Arora, because not only did they do their publicity for free, they actually gave the book, handed the book on a platter to Garuda Prakashan, which is
Mm-hmm.
a Indian publishing house which is interested in publishing Indic fiction and non-fiction books. And since they started accepting pre-orders, you might be already knowing it, there have been more than 15,000 copies
Yeah.
sold in one night, in less
Yeah.
than 24 hours. This book would have never sold this much if Bloomsbury India had published it. So actually, Monica Arora is a best-selling writer thanks to Bloomsbury. But the way Bloomsbury has behaved and the way the so-called champions of freedom of expressions have behaved, it is absolutely appalling. Because remember, English language publishing is a very small niche market in India. It's
Mm-hmm.
the same people who work as editors, it's the same people who work as reviewers, it's the same people who sit on the awards juries and decide who will be given the award for which book this year. And these are the same people who will criticize these books and say buy or not buy the book. So
Mm.
this is a very incestuous clique. You can call it the Lutyens clique or Khan Market clique or the wine and cheese gang, whatever it
Mm.
is. But
Mm.
what Bloomsbury has done has shown you the rotting underside of this small clique.
Okay.
How decisions are taken, how they are not democratic, and how, if you want to set up a new scholarly ecosystem, how they'll try their best to shout you down. But
Right.
what is good is that they can't do it anymore, as Garuda Prakashan and the phenomenal response to Monica Arora's book has shown.
Yeah, that's true. I will since you brought in the subject of freedom of speech and like hypocrisy from the other side, I'd like to ask you this question. Like on social media, when we see like you when you speak, when you put your point of view, you are attacked. You are called names. I mean, people are literally abused you online, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the same champions of freedom of speech and freedom of expression and whatnot. The freedom of speech goes down the drain when it comes to this side of it, and they had like abused you literally online. We had seen it so many times. So, what is your take on this? What will be your message from our platform if they are listening?
See, the thing is very simple. The way the entire left ecosystem operates is that
Mm-hmm.
they do two things. One, they hunt in a pack. So every time they decide that you have to be attacked, then the entire gang will come and attack you. This includes their top guys like the blue tick directors, their blue tick chires, writers, academicians, journalists, whatever. And then it will percolate down to the middle rung, which are the small time journalists, which have a following of 100, 200 followers. And then finally, the most virulent, most abusive attacks will come with their fake handles, who
Mm.
don't even have a face to show. Okay. So the attack will always happen like this, threefold. And the
Mm.
attack will always be led by their big names, by the blue tick handles. I have experienced this and seen this many times. So that is one. Second thing is they will never attack what you are saying. They will attack you personally. So when I do a talk on Goa Inquisition, where my data is correct, where my historical facts are correct, nobody can point out anything that is false in my data or my presentation. So
Right.
they will not question me on my data. They will not question me on the facts because they know they can't. So what they'll do is they'll attack me. They'll start by saying that why are you talking about this? Oh, you communal Sanghi housewife, what do you know? Oh, you are so fascist saffron or whatever. They'll
Right.
have
Right.
labels. So
Right.
they'll
Right. Right.
use those labels, they'll throw those labels in your face and they'll try to discredit you. So the attempt is to discredit you as a person, to demonize the messenger, not criticize the message because they know that they can never win if they criticize the message. So this is the standard modus operandi that the left ecosystem always uses against anyone, not just me. Nupur Sharma, who is the editor of Op India, she's
Mhm.
also been attacked like this. There are so many other people, and the attacks are really ridiculous. The attacks are on your looks, on your family, on your children, on your personal life, on every single thing except what you're saying, because they know that they cannot logically debate with you.
Right. Right.
So, besides the point, now you're asking me, how do I handle it? The way I handle it is whatever attacks that the left throws my way, it
Mhm.
only makes me stronger.
Mhm.
If they feel the need that the only way they can attack me is by targeting me personally, that means they've already lost.
Mhm.
So I have already won the battle, which is why the left is attacking me as a person, not attacking my message. So that
Mhm.
is one thing. Secondly, the really low grade attacks, which I see almost every day on my Twitter thing, they are about, something sexual slurs or abuse or calling me Nagin or a snake or
Mhm.
whatever, or a mediocre housewife, whatever you call it. So I just find it funny now. Earlier, I used to find it, a little irksome, but now I find it funny because I know that this is just useless hand wringing. They cannot counter my message. They cannot logically argue with me, which is why they are reduced to attacking me like
Right. Right.
this. So every time out of 15 attacks, 10 are faceless IDs calling me snake. That already means I won.
Mhm. Right. Right. Okay. Excuse me. When we talk about like the hypocrisy, not only on Twitter and Facebook, the hypocrisy has gone so far. It is like deeply inculcated into like organizational and big organizations and
That's right.
stuff.
That's right.
Recently we came across something called as feminism in India. I mean, which is
Yeah,
anything but feminism, which I personally feel.
that's right.
So
Yeah.
so what is do you think like these kind of all activism, the narrative building has just took a anti-Hindu mode rather than anything? And what is your take on the feminism the practiced in India, which is like completely opposite to the Shakti what we talk about?
See, feminism, if you study the history of feminism movement, it is a
Hmm.
legitimate movement which was launched in the West where women were denied equal rights, and
Hmm.
it was a
Yes.
movement basically to ensure equal rights for women. And there is nothing wrong with that movement per se or how it came into being. But the way it is being used in India by a lot of people, it is used as a whipping tool to attack Hindus particularly.
Yeah.
So you will have stupid binaries like if Muslim women have to wear a hijab, it's a matter of their choice and we should respect their cultural diversity. But if Hindu women wear a hijab, or if not a hijab, if a Hindu woman wears a ghungat even while doing puja, or if a Hindu woman does fasting for Karwa Chauth, then she's a victim of patriarchal oppression, she's a victim of misogyny, and they'll throw all these terms at you. See, left's greatest strength is basically their jargon. So
Ah.
they'll throw these terms at you like bullets, misogyny, Brahminical patriarchy, patriarchal oppression, equal opportunity, denial of equal opportunities, and the work, cisgender, whatever.
Right.
There
Right.
are a whole lot of
Right. Right. Right.
technical terms that they'll throw in your face.
Uh-huh.
They don't
Uh-huh.
really don't mean anything. It's just that the attack comes so fast and so rapid at you that most of the people are already taken aback and they will say, okay, what really happened here? So
Right.
I categorically say that I am not a feminist by the standards of Indian feminism. as it is expressed in the woke circles. Okay, I'm very careful about the words I'm using. So, what is feminism? So, I find it extremely icky that a woman, a young woman who has had all the privileges in her life, she's never worked, she's gone to the best colleges, she's got the best degrees, gone to the best universities, her parents have paid for her education, she has the right and the opportunities to do whatever she wants. And instead of fighting, really, there are many women's issues in this country. Okay, I'm not saying that women in India have got it great. No, there are so many women's issues, legitimate women's issues in India at every level. So instead of fighting for those legitimate women's issues, if you're reducing feminism to this social media tool where you'll say, oh, I'm going to a drugstore to buy sanitary napkins and I'll just hold them open in my hands and don't judge me for it, or I'm going to a liquor store and I'm buying beer openly and I'm putting pictures on social media, don't judge me for it, or I'm smoking a cigarette and that is, that is how I'm equal to men. I think that is, you're trivializing the very issues that you're talking
Yeah.
about, the issues
Right.
of women's rights. Feminism is not about your right to smoke like a man. You may want to, you may not want to, that's your problem. If you want to really screw up your lungs, that's your problem. But that is not feminism.
Right.
Feminism is ensuring that every girl child in this country gets an opportunity to study,
Right.
that she has the same opportunities as her brothers, that
Yeah.
if a family has only enough money to educate one child, then the family doesn't choose the boy over the girl. That is the fight that you should be fighting for. That is my only thing. I
Right.
have two sons and a daughter.
Mm.
Okay, while I want my daughter to have the equality of opportunities, while I want my daughter to be raised as a fearless, young, successful woman who wants to do whatever she wants in her life and she should have the freedom to do it, I also don't want my sons to grow up always defensive and always feeling that, oh, they have to be under this constant scanner, that just because they are born male they should bear this cross of patriarchy even if they haven't done anything, just because they are male. I mean, anything that they say is to be judged from this chashma that you are a male. That is also not equal, no.
Right. Right.
So that is my thing. I believe in humanism. I believe that every human being should have the chance to perform to the maximum of their potential. They should have opportunities. It may be a little idealistic, probably, but that is what I truly believe in. Does it look like I am one of those wallflowers to you that I will listen to somebody if tomorrow my husband says that, oh, you're a woman, you should stay only in the kitchen? Does it look to you that I am that kind of a woman?
No. No.
But the point is, I'm not going to forever say, oh, I'm a woman, I'm oppressed, oh, I'm a woman, nobody took my side, oh, I'm a woman, I'm forever going to cry victim. That is antithesis of feminism according to me, and
Mm.
that is exactly what is being peddled as
Mm-hmm.
feminism in
Mm.
these so-called woke feminist circles, and that is what I have a problem against. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not just feminism, what the left ecosystem has done in the last 70 years very conveniently is they have taken all the social justice platforms
Mm.
and they have made them their own. So environment and going green and green activism, it's a left platform. Tribal rights, it's a left platform. Caste, lower caste, whatever
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
struggle for
Well,
equality,
yeah.
that has also been appropriated by left. So everything is used as a tool to fight Hinduism from within. So they know our fault lines. They know that, and fault lines exist in any society. Okay, that's what
Right.
they're
Right.
doing in the US also.
Uh-huh.
They're right now exploiting the race fault line.
Yeah. Yeah.
In
Yeah.
India, the very big fault line is the caste fault line, which
Uh-huh.
is what the left has always used to further their own agenda to drive a wedge amongst Hindus. So,
Right.
which is what they have done for many, many years, and over 70 years, because they had the institutions, they had the academia and media in their hands. They have been doing it very systematically,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the problem that the Hindu side needs to understand. The Hindu side needs to study, and the Hindu side needs to fight in a
Okay.
very conscious, systematic way, not in an emotional, angry outburst kind of way, because that never helps.
Right. Right. When you talked about a couple different platforms that had been taken over, so
Mhm.
that has been used against Hindus. So, do you think it is just limited to the for the political reason, or it is mainly driven by the anti-Hindu agenda, and it is used viciously against Hindus, and that's the primary agenda, basically? What is your point of view on that?
See, for the last 70 years, what the left has very cleverly done with the tacit support of Congress, which was in power for most of these years, is take over institutions, take over academia, take over fields that are used to create narratives. So your films, your music, your art of storytelling, writing books, publishing books, teaching, all the humanities, all the history departments, and everything has been taken, and all the institutes which basically give scholarships, awards to scholars, identify scholars, they've all been taken over by the left. And this is not a phenomenon that happened yesterday. This has been happening since Nehru's days, and once Nurul Islam became the first HRD minister, first
Hmm.
communist HRD minister under Indira Gandhi, that process sort of sped up because the left very well knows what is the power of the narrative and how it can use young minds to create narratives.
Right.
So this has been done consciously, and it is a long process. It's not been done overnight. It's been happening over the years, which is why today if you go to many media channels or newspapers or any of the media outlets, and if you see who are their top guys, and if you go and check their degrees, you will see that most of them, the big guys, have gone to St. Stephen's or Doon School, or later on done their journalism from Columbia. Their fathers will be IS officers or IPS officers or foreign secretaries, or it's all very connected. It's all very incestuous, right? And
Hmm.
the agenda has always been very clear. The agenda has been that India is the only remaining living civilization, and that is what the left has always had a problem with. And the left here is actually an unholy alliance. It's not just the left. The left is like the front organization, but the agenda is a common agenda between missionaries, between
Yes.
jihadis,
Yeah.
and the left. So, mullah missionary Marxist, you can call
Hmm.
it. So, it's the 3M unholy alliance which has been trying to ensure that Hindus don't survive. And how do you ensure that? One is by actively converting people. Secondly, by encouraging jihad, where entire populations are basically forced to leave a
Right.
certain
Right.
area. That's what happened in Kashmir. We all know that.
Hmm.
And that's all happening in smaller areas in Bengal, in Kairana, in many
Yeah.
places.
Yeah.
Right
Uh-huh.
now, it's happening in Mewat. So that is one thing. The other thing is, as you can see, it's happening in Punjab, it's happening in the southern states. It's mass scale conversions to
Yeah.
Christianity. So that those are two things. And then the Marxists target the newer generation of Hindus by trying to make them completely deracinated, completely detached from their roots, from their culture, from their country, from their language, and to make them grow into self-loathing individuals who think that there is nothing good in their religion, there is nothing good in their culture, there is nothing good in their way of life, and who are aping the West blindly. Okay.
Hmm.
So that is been the threefold approach that this entire unholy cabal has been doing,
Hmm.
and they've been doing it over the past 70 years in multiple different ways, which is
Hmm.
why sometimes it's tiring to be a vocal voice for the Hindus, because the assaults are coming from all different directions. Today if it is some stand-up comedian saying something, tomorrow it will be some writer writing a book, day after tomorrow it will be some seminar which is supported by a church which talks about how Hinduism is anti-tribal or anti this caste or that caste. So you're forever fighting, and you're forever, you're like that. Forrest Gump guy playing table tennis. You have rackets in both hands, and you're
Right.
constantly
Right.
balling back and forth. There is no rest for you.
Right. Right. So when you talk about this, humanitarian and all this platforms taken over and all these champions, I would like to know your point of view. When someone like you say, abusing a Hindu god, that it has become a fashion, and someone replying to their they will burn down the entire city like Bangalore if someone said something about their prophet.
Mhm.
Someone saying something about the prophet, there is a fatwa and his throat is slit of Kamlesh Tiwari. And
Yes.
there are several other instances. But what happened to these people, these champions of, freedom of speech or humanitarian and, equality and everything, when it comes to like people like Heer Khan abusing Hindu gods and goddesses
Mhm.
every day. I mean, we see this video on everyday
Mhm.
basis.
Mhm.
So what happened to these people at that time? Where they go hiding? Do you know their location?
Yeah, it's obvious, no? The hypocrisy is very loud and clear. But the point is, it's not even the left hypocrisy. The left has always been a hypocrite. We all know that. For
Hmm.
70 years, we have seen their hypocrisy. So I'm not even bothered about, I mean, I would be very surprised to see a leftist who is not a hypocrite. Being left is being a hypocrite by definition. Okay, if you're left, you're a hypocrite. Matter over. The point here is, in these two cases that you talked about, is the response of the community. So
Hmm.
when somebody, that Naveen guy, wrote a post allegedly against somebody's religious figure, an
Hmm.
entire community suddenly got together, and this was
Yes.
not a small mob. They set fire to a police station. They burnt close to 100 private vehicles. And if that guy was not sent out of the police station by a police guy and hidden and taken out, they would have dragged him out and lynched him in
Hmm.
front of everybody. That is the kind of brute power that this community has always shown, and it is not even today. Okay, it's been happening since Mopla riots. This mass
Yeah.
people coming together and saying that, oh, you did something to our religious figure, so now we are going to kill you, and they actually do kill.
Oh
But
yes.
the point is, if something similar happened in Heer Khan's case, where a Muslim woman abused Hindu gods, what did the Hindus do? Maybe they outraged on social media. They filed a
Yes.
police complaint. They got her arrested. They put the faith in the law and order of the country, which is what they did for Ram Mandir also.
Yes.
See how many we are in the number, okay? If we had shown the same kind of behavior that the Muslims of Bangalore had shown in this case, do you think that the Ram Mandir would not have been built? But the point is, generations of Hindus went to court. They fought for 30 long years for a legal judgment to build a temple there. And yet you have some stupid people saying that, but, why do we need a mandir there? Why don't we build a hospital? Why don't we build a university? Are there is a large church coming up in Chhattisgarh, which is supposedly the biggest church in Asia, and Chhattisgarh is not even a traditionally Christian state. Has anybody asked, why do we need that church? Why not feed the tribal children? Why not make schools for tribal children out of that money? No,
Uh-huh.
they will not, because they're hypocrite. So the
Right.
question here is not about the left hypocrisy. The question here is about the response of a particular religion to the real or imagined slights to their religious figures, and the kind of lawlessness that they do, and versus the Hindu community, which has also taken action, but which has taken action by following all the legal processes.
Hmm.
What would have happened if in Heer Khan's case, wherever she was in, she was arrested in Prayagraj, but if she was in Bangalore, Prayagraj, wherever, what would have happened in such a situation if a large number of Hindus had gathered around and burnt houses of the other community? What would have happened? The same people would have demonized this. The Hindus could have also done it, no? Gathered 1 lakh people, burnt all the houses, and then done a human chain around a small mosque and said, look at us, oh, we are protecting a mosque from other people. That is what the Muslims did in Bangalore, no? They burned down police station, they burned down public property, they made the administration impose section 144, and then they did this fake human chain around a temple, and then everything was forgiven, right? NDTV,
Yes.
which did not even mention the main news, which did not even mention that it was Muslims who attacked the police station, but they very quickly did a whole story on how Muslims protected a mandir from burning by forming a human chain. But they never asked who were they protecting the temple from?
Yeah.
Who was going to burn down the temple?
Right.
Was
Right.
it Hindus? Was it Jains? Was it Buddhists? Was it Sikhs? कौन था?
Uh,
But this inconvenient question nobody is going to ask. So that is the difference. The difference is in the quality of response that Hindus have been giving in situations like this, and the way Muslims have been reacting.
okay. Yeah, we always see that in every riot. This is kind of similar situation that happens. Let me ask you this question. Like you obviously like you are not a part of RSS or BJP. But you're called Sangi every day. That's a different story. But why do people like forget people? Why do organizations like PETA feel the need to like take a dig at you or attack you or so on social media and stuff like that? Why they are so petrified by you?
See, nobody likes to their hypocrisy to be exposed in public, which is exactly what I did with PETA. I questioned their double standards on Hindu festivals and their silence on Eid, where they never mention the festival and where they never say openly that don't slaughter animals. They use India's laws to go to courts and ask for a ban on Hindu cultural practices like Jallikattu, like Kambala, like temple elephants, but they will never challenge Section 28 of the same act because that permits religious sacrifice and which is used for Eid slaughter. That is exactly what I pointed out, the hypocrisy. And I guess they didn't like that. And the only way they thought that they would attack me is by attacking me in person. They actually thought that they are a blue tick handle. They're an organization. They're an organization which has a budget of 8 crores in India and $65 million worldwide. So
Hmm.
they thought that by just attacking me and attacking me continuously because they told me for a whole day, I would be silent. That
Hmm.
if they call me a hypocrite, I would be quiet. And then they would say that, oh, they won. And then everything will be all right. But that didn't happen. I asked them 5 questions, which they didn't reply for 2 days, till people shamed them. And then they suddenly woke up. And then they wrote those epic series of 28 tweets to me in 30 minutes, which basically didn't answer a single question. But the grandstand was, oh, we are very busy. We don't have the time to answer questions. If you don't have the time to answer 20 questions, then why are you devoting 28 tweets from your official handle to me? And I'm just a person, I'm just an
Right.
individual. I'm
Right.
not an activist. I'm not a political party member. I don't have any organization of my own. I don't even have an official page of my own. I am just an individual. But the fact is, here is a blue ticked organization which claims to work for human animal rights. They got so petrified and they got so vanquished by an individual that they thought that the only option that they had was to troll me. They are lost.
Hmm.
In the last in the run up to the Eid, the way PETA India exposed themselves, all their PR efforts will never give them that kind of prestige back in India. That is for sure. I
Right.
mean, you go to their wall, their tweets have a response of 20, 21 tweets. And if I reply to their tweets, doesn't matter what I say, my response gets 5 times the more number of retweets. It's very obvious who has won this battle.
Right. Definitely. So this is like when you previously talked about the leftist, Marxist, Mullah, the three M's that you talked
Yeah,
about,
yeah.
Mullah, Marxist, and missionary. They had
Yeah.
as they had so deeply penetrated into the system, and they have a very massive ecosystem, which is very well managed. I mean,
Mhm.
that should be credit that we should give the credit to them. That is very well managed, and they were able to pull it off for at least 70 years. Now things are changing, obviously
Yeah.
for good. um, Excuse me. Do you think Hindus are equipped well enough today, are what you call enough informed or well equipped today to battle that, or what is that would be done to build an ecosystem from our side to battle those things?
See, I wouldn't say that the battle is completely won and that we have a parallel ecosystem in place, because ecosystem doesn't happen in overnight, nor does it happen in 1 year or 2 year or 3 years or whatever. Remember, the left has had 70 years to build a very robust ecosystem, right? An ecosystem is built by building institutions. It is built by creating scholars. It is built by creating writers. It is built by creating filmmakers, by emphasizing on your soft power and getting everybody together and working on a common agenda, common minimum agenda, basically. That sadly is only beginning to happen now in India. It wasn't happening. I mean, apart from the RSS, which is a huge organization which has done tremendous work, actually. I know that a lot of people call me Sangi, but I actually have had no connection of with the RSS till recently. But when I saw the kind of work that they have done, it's phenomenal. I'm talking about on the ground, not necessarily in the areas of creating an ecosystem, but their ground social work, their
Oh, yeah.
ground presence, and the kind of institutions that they've built in the areas of social work is phenomenal. But what we need is an intellectual ecosystem, and that intellectual ecosystem, it's not just enough to say that it's a government job to do it, it's a government's job to do it. Yes, it is the government's primary responsibility to do it, and it will do it, but it also has to do it slowly and has to do it in a gradual way. But what we need is for our people to come together to identify that we need serious scholarship, to identify people amongst us who will specialize in certain areas, and not one person can do everything. Okay. So I have my mentor Harikiran Vadlamani of Indic Academy. He always says, and it's very valid that I should talk about it. He says that our society or our culture needs three things: somebody needs to protect, somebody needs to preserve, and somebody needs to propagate. Okay, these are three
Hmm.
distinct areas. And one person cannot do all. It's just humanly possible, impossible. So you have to identify who are the people whose core strength is to protect, who are the warriors, who are your intellectual kshatriyas. Then you have to identify people whose job is to preserve. These are your traditional scholars, these are your pujaris, these are your people who run yoga institutes, classical dance institutes, classical music institutes, all of these people, who work to preserve the culture that we have inherited all these years. And then we have people who propagate, which are your new age spiritual gurus like Sri Ravi Shankar or whoever. This is just a name I'm taking. Or Iyengar Guruji, who has taken yoga all the way to the world. So these kind of people. So these are areas, these are three different areas, but what we need are individuals who are loosely connected and who support each other in this area. So I have this mantra, I have this mnemonic for our ecosystem. I am a mother of teenagers, so I know how important mnemonics are to remember something difficult.
Hmm.
So this mnemonic is very simple. It is
Hmm.
Hindu, or you can say a hashtag Hindu if you want.
Hmm.
So the H in this Hindu stands for help. So we need to help each other build a network and become stronger. Now, I can say from my experience, because I am so active on social media and my posts are quite popular and I have a decent support base on social media, what I can do, which is in my reach, is to help amplify the reach of other people. So my job it is to identify other people within the social media ecosystem or even non-social media ecosystem, and to make sure that I support them. So, for example, smaller YouTube channels or people who are doing memes or people who are doing videos. So, they right now they are just beginning to show promise. So, identify these people, say that guide, they amplify their messages, share their messages. That is one way I can help different people depending upon their capacity and their ability. They can help other fellow Hindus and other fellow Indic people in a different way. So
Hmm.
whatever you can do, if you have a lot of money, give money. If you have a lot of time, give time. If you can work on ground, work on ground. If you can mentor other people, mentor other people. If you can teach something to other people which will help them better, get better in their professional lives, do that. But make sure that this is done with the Indic perspective. That is help from Hindu. Second is I is interrogate. Interrogate is question. Question whatever you're seeing. Every time you see a narrative that is against you or your beliefs or whatever, don't suffer in silence. Question. Ask questions then and there. So if you are paying for a stand-up comedy show and you're sitting in the audience and somebody makes a stupid joke against your gods, stand up then and there. Interrogate. Say we will not tolerate this. If you're standing at the bus stop and if somebody gives you, some missionary gives you a pamphlet saying that, oh, this is the Holy Bible, please come to our religion and denounce your old religion, throw it back in their face. Ask them, why are they giving it to you? That it's an assault on your beliefs. So question then and there, and question at every level. Don't let go. We have been letting go for too long. But fortunately, that is not happening anymore. I've seen even in smaller areas,
Yes.
people are shooting videos of them questioning the missionaries and saying that, why are you converting us? We just want to be left alone. I am not converting you. Why are you converting me? That is happening even in smaller places now. There's a handle called No Conversions on social media, which has a series of such videos. Of course, the challenge is far bigger because the
Oh
other
yeah.
side is a lot of hope, and there are mass conversions being planned in practically every state of India. That is true. But I'm saying that on our own, these are the things we can do. So help, interrogate. Third is N. N is to notice and name. So learn to see prejudices, learn to read intelligently a movie, a article, a book, anything where you might have earlier not noticed subtle anti-Hindu biases, but
Yes.
now it is time to train yourself for that subtle anti-Hindu bias. So if you're seeing in a movie a person dressed like a Hindu god and begging, that's an insult when it's got nothing to do with that person. Could be shown as a beggar in any other outfit also, but why should that person be shown as your god or your icon? So these are the things that we have to train ourselves to notice and to name and to constantly question. That's N. Then comes D. D is to defend and to document. Defend, obviously, every time you see that your practices are being assaulted, your religion is being assaulted, defend it and document small things about your culture, about your local festivals, local temples, local way of life, little things, the rangoli your mom makes during festivals, the kind of special food that you make for a particular festival, your regional variation in celebrating a festival. These are the things that build a culture. These are the things that keep people together. These are the things that have kept our people together despite not having one single book or one single savior or one single prophet all these years. So these are the things we must document, and we must document diligently. And the last is understand. There cannot be a fight without understanding who you are. So
Exactly.
read about your own scriptures, read about your own culture, read about your own dharma, read about what it means. If you have questions in your mind, ask those questions, find answers to those questions, but only when you understand more about yourself that you are able to defend. So this is my Panchakshari mantra, you can say, Hindu. So if you remember that, that's a good way to build an ecosystem, I would say.
That's a very fantastic way to put it, and a really effective way if it is practiced. Really, the things that you told. Um, um, before we end this interview, I always wanted to know from a person like you. Yes, there are ways to do build this ecosystem. You put it a very nice way. I want to know what is that is stopping, or what is that is lacking in the Hindu society that can be that if we work on that, that will be really helpful. What is that one thing, or one more than one thing, that is lacking in the society?
See, we have always had one big problem, roughly, which has sort of kept us in this situation. That single, and I'm talking about the really big elephant in the room, it is lack of unity. And by
Yes.
lack of unity, I mean, you see, being different is good. I'm not saying to celebrate your diversity. I'm not saying that you should not be proud of your language or your subculture or your food or the way you dress or your regional identities, whatever. By all means, celebrate them. That's not the point. But remember that when the other side attacks you, they are not attacking you because you're a Kannadiga. They're not attacking you because you're a Maharashtrian. They're not attacking you because you're a Kashmiri or Konkani or Tamil or Telugu or whoever. They are attacking you because you're Hindu.
Yes.
They are not attacking you because you're a Brahmin or a Thakur or a Nishad or a Dalit or a tribal or whatever. They are attacking you because you're a Hindu.
Hindu.
They are not attacking you because you're a doctor, you're a vegetable seller, or you're a teacher, or you're a dancer, or whatever. They are attacking you because you're a Hindu. So your response also should be as a Hindu. So your first identity, it should be Indian, and your second identity, your equally important identity, should be that of a Hindu. Everything else comes later. If you
Right.
are mindful of this always, and if you are able to sort of put this into practice all the time, I think that would solve the problem to a great extent.
Yeah.
Work on a common minimum program.
Right. Definitely. Shefali ji, it was indeed a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you very much for giving us the time. Thank you very much. Jai Hind, Jai Shri Ram.
Thank you so much, Jai Hind. Thank you so much for calling. Thank you.
Thank you.